This is What's Left America. I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm James Campbell.
And I'm Chris Bell.
Andy's not here today. She showed up, but she wasn't feeling good. I don't know what she did last night. She didn't reveal
She didn't really
that.
go into very much detail.
Didn't go into detail, but she wasn't feeling well, so she went on home. We'll find out later.
Looked pretty bad.
Looked pretty bad. Didn't sound good, so
she sold it well.
So she did sell it well. And What's Left America is proudly produced by Left Out Media and brought to you by the generosity of our sponsors and friends, and hopefully someday friends like you. Today on the show, we're going to cover President O'Rourke, the changing face of the 2020 campaign. We're going to interview a special guest, Michael Watts. The Young and the Restless, we're going to interview a guest, young man, Ali Zeta. We're going to have a new game, America's newest game, sweeping the country. Was it a tweet? I'm going to ask you guys a series of questions about whether a tweet, it was an actual real tweet from President Trump, and you get to decide if it was a real tweet or not, or did it just come out of my screwed up head?
Ooh, I can't wait. Is that a prize?
There is a prize, a big prize. And the last topic of the day will be an independent judiciary. Who really needs it? And, of course, we'll finish the show with Out of Left Field. Let's get right into it. First topic of the day, President O'Rourke, the changing face of the 2020 campaign. Let's introduce our very special guest, Michael Watts. He's a well-known, nationally renowned trial lawyer, but he's also a major Democratic fundraiser, and glad to have him on the show. Michael, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We really appreciate your taking time out because we know how busy you are. So you're based in San Antonio, Texas, but right now you've been traveling all over the country, and I know how busy you've been. Let me just start this off right now because you do a lot of work for the Democratic Party, and we really appreciate that. You don't jump into a race as a major fundraiser like you and the other guys that help fund the races until you're sure. Hey, you've spoken with Beto, I'm sure. Is he going to run for president?
Well, I don't think he's made that decision yet, but my experience with Beto is he's very deliberate, and he's going to spend time with his family over the holidays and then make a choice one way or the other before January begins.
Michael, given what we saw on Election Day, and I assume you're pretty excited about it, like many of us are, but given the excitement that Beto was able to generate, do you not think that he would do more for the state of Texas if he ran against John Cornyn in 2020 and then became sort of an anchor to build on here in the Lone Star State?
Well, I think selfishly, I would much prefer, for purposes of other Democratic races across the state, that he run against Cornyn. But from the standpoint of, what he's most likely to be successful at. I mean, he achieved this extraordinary success in the reddest of red states and about turned it blue. It certainly has a tinge of purple because of Beto O'Rourke. And you take that same skill set to Iowa and New Hampshire, and it's going to be like shooting fish in a barrel. He's got a political talent unlike anything I've seen since Ann Richards. And so for me personally, sure, I'd rather him run for Senate because he'll sweep all the elections just like he did this time for the Democrats. But if he runs for president, I think he's likely to be successful in getting the nomination.
Michael, this is James Campbell. Yeah, I agree with you. Beto ran an extraordinary campaign and really did well to reach out to those Texans who were on the fence or wanted something different. But he still lost to arguably the second most hated politician in America. So what qualifies him for a run for president?
Well, I think the extraordinary shift that he created among the Democratic Party. I mean, it's not lost on anybody, including myself and Chris, who both either ran or looked into running statewide, that there's been about a 1 million vote detriment or deficit, registered Republicans versus registered Democrats for some time. He flipped that around and turned it into 200,000. And so literally 500,000 votes either weren't voting and did or were flipped by Beto O'Rourke. And that's an extraordinary achievement. I don't believe that that's because of the unpopularity of Senator Cruz. I think it had everything to do with the inspirational qualities that Beto O'Rourke put out there and motivated a whole new generation of young voters. who typically stay home and this time got out and voted. If you translate that kind of enthusiasm to the primary voting sites in Iowa and New Hampshire, I think that there's just going to be a wave of youthful enthusiasm unlike anything we've seen since 2007, when 20,000 kids showed up at a rally for Senator Obama in Austin, Texas, and we all knew he had something going on that we didn't understand at the time. Otherwise, we'd have President Hillary Clinton, right?
I read an article the other day that you were quoted in, basically talking about everybody waiting to see what Beto's going to do before they get involved. How long does Beto have to wait and hold people at bay before he makes his final decision? I mean, January's coming and people are waiting, and movement needs to happen.
Yeah, I don't think these opportunities come along very often. I don't think that he can afford to wait much past New Year's Day. There are 20 some odd people who are going to run for president. They tend to fall into lanes. And as I say, there are vertical lanes and horizontal lanes. In terms of the vertical lanes, you have the progressive wing of the party and the moderate wing. And so you've got the gentleman who first announced, the congressman from Maryland, who's been in Iowa for 2 years now, Joe Biden, Mr. Landrieu from Louisiana, the gentleman who's the governor of Colorado, all trying to occupy that moderate lane. And then on the progressive lane, you've got Bernie Sanders, you've got Elizabeth Warren, and then you've got two senators from opposite sides of the country, and Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, who all want to take that progressive lane. Well, the horizontal lane is different, right? Like my former mayor, Julian Castro, is thinking, well, are we going to nominate a septuagenarian like Biden or Warren or Sanders, or are we going to allow a new generation of leaders come in, somebody in their 40s or 50s? Beto fills that horizontal lane as well. And so to answer your question, he doesn't have long, but at the same time, he has the ability to suck a lot of oxygen out of the room and to occupy a progressive lane that does not scare moderates, and at the same time present a new vision for America that causes all the young people to get motivated in a hurry. So he's got the month of December. People aren't going to wait much longer. If he decides not to do it by January the 5th or something like that, then that's fine. But if he decides he's in, he's going to create a firestorm that will consume a lot of the combustible oxygen in the air and will kill the presidential prospects of a lot of people who are thinking that they might win.
Well, Michael, talking about consuming oxygen and killing other prospects, what does this do to the Julian Castro presidential campaign?
Well, if Beto runs, I think it hurts it badly. I think Julian is very talented. I think he has a place in terms of a young, progressive, new generation. But Beto ran an extraordinary campaign and would start off with an incredible fundraising list, an incredible email list, and would occupy that same place that Julian Castro is occupying. So I think if Beto runs, it's very harmful to Julian. And if Beto doesn't run, Julian's going to be in that space of a young, new generation of progressives that maybe the young people of the Democratic Party get behind.
Michael, Beto is a known quality in Texas, and to a certain extent outside of Texas. He raised a lot of money from people outside of the state. But his candidacy feels a little like Bernie Sanders 2.0. How is his message going to be different from Bernie's in terms of that having that same enthusiasm, but have a different message?
Well, I think if you had been to any of the Bernie Sanders rallies, and I went to the Iowa caucus in 2016, the electricity that he generated through just the unvarnished honesty of his ideals was a sight to behold. And I was a Hillary Clinton guy, but it was impressive. And it's real easy when you think you are in support of the folks who are going to get nominated to discount somebody like Bernie. But he almost took that nomination. And I think that the thing that Beto has going for him is he can appeal to the progressive wing of the party without intimidating the moderate wing. I never heard him say one word in the last 60 days of the election about you need to be a Democrat. He said, I'm going to invite you, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, to do X or Y or Z. We're Texans first. I think that's very easily translatable to a unifying message, a so-called red states and blue states know we're the United States message on the national stage.
Michael Watts, thank you very much. We appreciate your coming on. Hope to have you,
You
back
bet,
again
guys.
sometime. All right, have a good day. Thank you.
All right, take care.
All right, bye-bye. You know, and that's what I was saying earlier to you guys about Beto, and when I was first right after the election saying I think he's going to run, is he has that message that can translate. And y'all were saying, you know, it's too early, but hang on, think
Chris,
back,
the message gets dissected in a presidential campaign like it doesn't in a senatorial race. And some people have come back and said, well, what really was the message? And was it just that he was cool? Because he was cool, and he is a very attractive candidate, and I think that was embraced by a lot of folks. But a presidential race is very, very different. And when the biggest race that you've ever run is for a congressional district, and then for a state, I don't know.
Think back to Barack Obama. The biggest thing he had ever done was give a speech at the Democratic National Convention, and the next thing he did was run for president and win.
Well, he won his Senate seat.
Yeah, he absolutely, and I think that's part of the difference, Chris. I think that Beto has a great story of overcoming adversity and the DWI in his life and other issues.
If that DWI kills him, then.
But as Chris said, this is a far bigger stage, and the stakes are going to be higher, and it's going to be far more people shooting arrows at him. So it's going to be a whole different ball game. And not only that, not only does he have to win the Democratic primary, then he has to run against a Donald Trump.
Well,
and then what's that message going to be? He has to get out of the primary first.
Well,
I'm not giving him
the nomination.
Yeah.
But it's just incredible how excited James has gotten about Beto, because if you would recall, during the election
he has
season,
no chance.
He has no chance.
He lost.
Oh, wait. Are you quoting somebody when you say that?
Yeah. He lost.
Well, as Michael Watts just eloquently pointed out, he came damn close.
Okay. Let me just say this.
I'm selfish like Michael Watts. I would love to see Beto come back and run against John Cornyn in 2020. I hear he won't do that, but I just think that.
Well, the thing that made me excited about his candidacy, Chris, is not necessarily that he didn't win or lose, but he lost. Is that it showed the potential to turn Texas into a blue state.
Sure.
And reach out to those voters with a message that resonates with those. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, you're a Texan, like Michael said.
And so I want to talk about Andrew White's article or op-ed. I guess it was an op-ed that he wrote.
We need to explain who he is.
Yeah, I am. I was about to. Andrew White is the son of former Governor Mark White, who was a Democratic governor in Texas. And
he ran an incredibly strong gubernatorial campaign, don't you think, Chris?
Andrew,
stop it.
Andrew wasn't the strongest campaign we've seen in a long time. But he wrote an op-ed about O'Rourke said to him when he was going to run that his dad had given him some advice that to O'Rourke said you're running a 254 county race, and don't forget that. And O'Rourke said, I used that as my central aspect of my strategy. I'm going to touch the courthouse of every courthouse in the state. And what Andrew White said was he did that, but he missed the central point of my father's advice was that you have to have a message that touches everyone in the state. And he didn't do that. He only campaigned to the metropolitan areas and not the rural areas, and he left the rural areas behind. And that was basically I'm trying to compress a pretty big op-ed.
Yeah, it was really long, and it was kind of surprising, and
it was.
But I think it's going to be the debate going forward,
right.
And the whole 254 county thing it was great and it played well on social media and it sounded fantastic. But the truth of the matter is the 254 county thing has been around for I don't know how many years now. I know John Odom, a friend of mine here in Houston, ran for attorney general and went to every county. And that was part of his, his spiel. And so just going there, Andrew's point is just going there without anything to get them to vote for you. But I think this is going to be the big debate going forward in Houston. It's maybe going to be, or in Texas, and maybe going to be the big debate going forward in other states is the difference between rural and urban and suburban voters. And many of us feel, and I think I'm pretty much joining up in that camp, is that the success is based in the urban communities. The urban communities are growing, the suburban communities are growing, and they're growing more and more Democratic. The rural communities are shrinking, and they're going to continue to be highly Republican, and you're probably not going to switch that, but they're also not going to get any bigger. And at some point, the urban will just outweigh the rural and will win.
Well, so. But what White was saying was he not only did he lose them, he lost them by 71%. And by going to those rural communities with the exact same message he was using in the metropolitan areas, not only did he lose them by a larger margin, he energized those voters to vote for Ted Cruz.
Well, that's the problem. Sorry.
Well, no, I see what you're saying. There's a sweet spot in the rural communities if you can message to these people and make their interests your interests, and he didn't do that.
Right.
But as Chris, I agree with Chris as well.
Just leave them alone?
Well, no, you don't ignore them.
Yeah.
You have to go and talk to the rural communities because they have interests. And what a lot of the Democrats have failed to do in statewide races is they run to the metropolitan areas, and that strategy is to just get out the vote in those areas and not go to these communities where people have real needs. I'm sure there's a way to message to these people. Right. I just don't know what that message is.
How do you go to a highly Republican area as a Democrat and message to them this a message that's not going to be used against you
I think
Chris Bell did it in a gubernatorial race.
Yeah, but probably had a little bit of the same effect. That I would have to go back and look at the vote. I think we did fair in rural areas, but certainly weren't burning it up. But those areas have become more and more Republican.
And more Republican,
And I think that's really interesting what you bring up, that he may have excited the base, because if you go into a television market like Amarillo or like Laredo, they're going to put you on air, and that's going to be the big story of the day. And if your message is not at the least bit in sync with what they're thinking, you're probably exactly right, Chris, that it probably does just as much on the other side to stir them up and say, hell, I'm not going to vote for that guy.
Yeah.
So,
Ted didn't have to go there.
Right.
That's right. Well, let's move on. The young and the restless. As millennials grow into voters and campaign contributors, how do elected officials attract them into the political arena? That's really been the real question in politics. And as a group, they've been largely ignored by politicians as they've been mostly standoffish to politics so far, not in the last cycle. Let me introduce somebody to you. Ali Zaidi. Ali Zaidi is a 19-year-old student at the University of Texas, widely known as the second best university in the state of Texas, right behind Sam Houston State University. And he was the co-director of the digital operation for Democrat Mike Collier in his bid against Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick here in Texas. And they regularly sketched out the campaign's Facebook ad strategy on a blackboard in the Student Center meeting room at the University of Texas. Ali, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to take issue. I mean, UT is the university of the first class and second to none. So, looking forward.
I was hoping you wouldn't let that go unanswered.
I see you over there drinking the Kool-Aid, man.
I get that in every chance I get, Ali. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. I read the article about you and your partner there running this campaign out of the University of Texas. Classic. It was great. Tell us about how you ran the ad campaign for the second most powerful position in the state of Texas out of the Student Activity Center.
Well, let me start off with first of all, thank you for having me. And I made a mistake in the newspaper. The lieutenant governor is actually the most powerful position in the state.
That's
So,
true. That's true, actually. Yeah.
And there's, of course, some really cool history there with the Civil War as to how that ended up. But we're one of the few states that elects our lieutenant governor separate than the governor, which provides a really unique opportunity here in Texas in terms of our legislation, our government structure. But we got involved with the statewide campaign after me and my partner worked a long time in local politics. Well, long time relative to a 20-year-old. Within Fort Bend County in Southwest Houston. I worked for a commissioner down there for a long time and got involved in county government, rode horses, and all the fun classic Texas government stuff. And then from there, we were brought on originally as interns to work for Mike. And we soon found out, which is sort of something that's duplicated itself across a lot of campaigns, especially in Texas and across the country with Democrats, where you have firms that more or less take advantage of well-meaning candidates that know they need to invest into the digital arena and take more or less a firm's word at it. And the firm that we were using was a well-regarded one, but unfortunately it looked like they were stuck using Microsoft Paint and we're in 1995. And when you already have a landscape where you're the underdog, you can't afford to be wasting money on bad tactics and on bad design, and about people who are not giving you good data back. And it's one of the great things that we have as Democrats, that we have the ability to really have the upper hand when it comes to digital technology. So Mike trusted us, gave us a shot, and we ran with it. And hell, we ran the closest lieutenant governor race in 20 years. So we're quite proud of what we did on that race. And we look forward towards the future to see what it holds for Texas.
One of the things that I think that y'all have helped prove that I think politicians need to pay attention to, and have been, quite frankly, is that the millennial population really doesn't give a damn about traditional media, the ad campaigns over radio and television. It's social media that they're paying attention to, and that's attracting them into the political arena. Do you agree with that? And how do you run those ad campaigns?
Yeah, I think that's true without a doubt, 100%. And in fact, I'd say, even more than sort of what you think of as millennials, as 18 to 35-year-olds that eat avocado toast every morning for breakfast. It goes a little further into our main ad campaigns. We're targeting actually folks that were sort of two different ad groups that we saw that were doing the best. One was folks that are who are about 45 to 50, and then 65 plus. Surprisingly, women 65 plus love digital marketing more than anyone else. And sort of on the end on traditional media, one thing that you're seeing a lot in campaigns that's changing, especially on the Democratic side for the better, and I think Beto symbolizes this better than anyone else, is that communication strategies used to be a question of how do we get into the newspaper, because it was assumed that if you're on the newspaper, people read the newspaper. And that's changed a lot because folks, for whatever reason, don't read the paper as much. And now communications has now become a lot more about how do we get in front of people where they are. So what we did on this campaign is we worked backwards from there to figure out who are the voters that we want to talk to and reach. And then where are those voters in terms of the mediums that they interact with the most. And for some people, that's Facebook. For some people, that's Twitter. For some people, that's digital TV. For some people, it's none of the above, and it's trying to get to them physically. Whatever it is, each one of them deserves a strategy of its own, which for that purpose, you need people who can manipulate and work with data well, which millennials, I personally would argue, do better than anyone else because we have grown up in a world where we have so many options, and then we understand how media is more an a la carte rather than sort of a singular choice than it was before.
Ali, I'm curious because you mentioned Beto, and we just finished talking about him here on the podcast, but obviously he was the reason for a lot of the excitement in Texas and a lot of the excitement among young people. And do you think that that can be replicated going forward, or was that just all about Beto?
Well, I mean, there's definitely there a lot with Beto. I mean, I have most of my friends don't study government, don't know much about government at all. Could not name you really anyone in government. But then when Beto ran, there was this real energy that they felt. And for the first time, I saw them engage in the political process. And I think a large part of that is that you have young people who've lived in a state where they didn't know that. I mean, for our entire lives, there's been single party control in this state. And for us, it was never a possibility that anything would be competitive. And for that reason, I would attribute it to that younger people have never been involved in politics in Texas as much as they should, and have not felt the importance of voting. And Beto has given hope to an entire generation that if we work hard enough, we can turn this state blue, and that Texas is not forever damned to be the state of Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick. Well, at least I hope. And I think there's a lot of lessons to learn from Beto. I think the first thing is about talking about issues that young people care about and then being present and available to them. One of my friends once commented that, like, the thing that he liked the most about Beto is that all of the ads that Beto produced that were on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter, first of all, they were there. Second of all, they weren't highly produced. It was Beto speaking directly to the camera in a way that they knew that whatever Beto was saying was Beto saying it, and it wasn't poll tested. And then lastly, he took questions at these town halls. He would come to university campuses and answer every single question for 2 to 3 hours, which was unique in of itself. So I think there's a model there that we as Democrats especially can try to duplicate. And part of that's personality and part of that is tactics. And we need a good mix of them both.
But do you think because of his success, it's going to require like older politicians to learn how to longboard?
I don't have the longboard. I think every politician has their own. I think so. I worked for Mike Collier, who was an accountant, loves numbers, which isn't particularly something that doesn't.
But don't you think he
really
could have made
attract
up the?
young people.
Don't you think he could have made up the 5% if he had gotten on a longboard at Whataburger?
Or just wear a sweaty shirt?
No. I mean, I think it has to. What young people especially are looking for is authenticity. That's what made Obama so attractive. That's what made Bernie so attractive. And same thing with Beto. And every candidate needs to find their authentic voice. So Mike, for example, we had him jump into a lake once in a suit. And he came up with that idea on his own. It was our best trending video of all time, producing the entire campaign. And it was something that was genuinely him, and it worked well. So whatever that equivalent is, the longboarding, jumping into a lake, I think each candidate needs to find that voice and then communicate it online where people are.
Ali, it's really encouraging to hear that someone your age is involved in politics in a way that you are. I'm glad that you broke down the percentages of the people who use social media, and it's interesting to find out that women who are 65 and older actually are engaged. My question is, what platform in Mike's race really resonated for voters? Was it Twitter? Was it Facebook? Which one did you find people connected with the most?
I think we experimented with a lot of things on Mike's campaign about sort of trying to find that most authentic voice. And we ultimately found that Facebook ended up being the most conducive for us.
For older people or younger people?
For everyone. So, okay. I mean, of course, we did different ad targeting. We had different sorts of messages that we put out in front of young people, different in front of older teachers, broken out demographics, regionally, whatever we had to do. But we found that when we put, especially Mike, so I mean, there's an interesting trend that's going on in politics right now about the more sort of unproduced and unprofessional a video or a graphic or a website looks to a certain extent, the more likely it is to perform better. So we did these things called Collier Chronicles, where we used to record essentially ads that we would put tens and tens of thousands of dollars behind on Facebook, recorded straight from an iPhone inside of a gas station with Mike holding milk and a burger in one hand and the other asking for a $10 donation. And lo and behold, it would have a 600% return on donations.
Man.
So, I mean, that sort of thing really, really worked well on Facebook. The only sort of struggle with that is, and good thing is, you have to work within a 30-second time frame. So overall, especially for Mike, we saw that video worked really, really well. And we saw the same thing with Beto. I mean, Beto was Facebook Lives, but video has sort of become this whole new sort of sphere of breaking the wall between politicians and people and showing the real life and the real personality behind them, which worked well for us, and I think it'll work well in the future.
Did y'all target at all by racial demographics? Like, did you have a message on social media that targeted, say, Latinos or African Americans or Asians, or was it one message that Mike used?
And can you do that?
Yeah, you can do all sorts of different targeting.
Of course,
I don't want to scare people about how much of their data is out there. But I think one of the really cool things and benefits that we have as Democrats is that we have a national voter profile.
You have a bigger tent,
but
too.
Did you have trouble this year with the new scrutiny of these social media pages after the 2016 election? And did you have trouble working with them using that type of demographics?
Our targeting still, I mean, we can get pretty sophisticated and leveling by, household income, location, voting history. And then the DNC offers us a lot of data and algorithms as well. On the Facebook side, things have tightened up to a certain extent. So in order to make sure I'm not a Russian sitting in Moscow, Facebook once a year requires, they essentially require me to pull in my social security number, and then they send me a piece of mail at a U.S. mailing address, and I then have to enter. And there's a couple of other redundancies that exist in the system.
Right. Hold on.
And then they have.
Go ahead. You're fine.
Oh yeah. They also every ad that is submitted to Facebook has to be screened by an individual at Facebook, and they disapprove about probably 25% of them, which you can then appeal. So I mean, it's not impossible, and I think the scrutiny level is where it should be. I think there's a couple of rules that I would change here and there. But I imagine it's going to get more difficult.
How many times did you have to prove you weren't a 400-pound fat guy sitting on your couch?
Lots of times. I mean, this year especially, we were particularly worried about hacking of all sorts into our systems, mostly because we have so many different softwares that connect to each other. And if someone hacks into, for example, our campaign, there's the possibility that they work up the food chain. So we have a lot of systems that are part of our job is to then create a lot of backup systems that prevent something from happening. And we had a couple of security scares happen here and there. And the folks up in Washington helped us fix those things. And I assume those things happen across the country as well. And we were on top of it, expected it, and we're ahead of it.
Ali, I think the thing you really have to worry about is if Donald Trump ever sees you, then he's going to change all that from a 400-pound guy to like a 120-pound Iraqi sitting on his couch doing things. So be mindful of that. But to wrap this up, because I think we're all really incredibly impressed with what you've done. But one thing that I've talked about on this show, and one thing I'm very worried about, is sort of an age war developing in the Democratic Party. And I'm curious, given your experience in 2018, are you seeing that? And are you seeing that going forward? And can we avoid it?
I think we're at a really interesting point in Democratic politics in this state. For folks that don't know, the party is governed by what's known as the Senate Democratic Executive Committee. Every Senate district in the state at the convention votes in members to sit on this executive board that, in a sense, governs the party. And I think it's a really good microcosm for what's happening with the party, where you had a lot of folks that were there since Democrats were last in power in the 90s. And we're seeing some of those people sort of shift over to millennials and 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds. And as far as I've seen, I don't think for folks that are being involved in the party and are trying to work in productive ways, there's not a lot of friction there. There's an understanding that there are people who have held this party together through these 20 years and helped it to now grow and blossom. And there's this new energy that's coming in that's going to propel us into victory. And I think those folks are working really well together. I think on the ground, like any party, we have to figure out some things here and there, and there is tension and friction. But I think it's all good. It's all people who want to be involved and want the best for our party. And heck, I would rather be in the position we're in, where we have friction and sort of vitality and energy in the party, rather than on the Republican side where they're running out of voters to go to. So yeah, I think it's a good problem to have overall.
Hey, Michael, according to a survey,
Ali.
I'm sorry, Michael was our last interview. Ali, I'm sorry. Shows
Do you
that
mind if we call you Michael?
Shows that I'm a boomer and I just had a senior moment. But anyway, so an estimated 31% of millennials voted in the midterms, which was about 10% more than they did in 2014. And I just wanted to know, from your perspective, if you were to write a prescription for keeping that momentum into 2020, what would that be in terms of the social platform, and how do you keep reaching out to millennials to continue that enthusiasm into the presidential campaign?
I think that's a really important question that everybody from county parties to state to national parties need to be asking. And I think it's a sort of two-prong. On the first end, I think one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is sort of the barriers to voting that exist for young people. This cycle, we saw at Prairie View, we saw at Texas State, the barriers that exist to voting in terms of lack of polling stations, of voter registrars doing everything they can to limit young people from voting. In the state of Texas, it still remains the case that, for example, if you're someone like me who wants to vote in their home county, you have to go through a two-step process to submit an application for a ballot by mail, then after you submit the application, then you actually get the ballot, and then you have to return it again. And those two steps alone, God knows how many people don't submit their vote because of that.
Right.
And there's so many students who have no idea that they have to re-register in the county where their university resides in order to vote there. So I think that's one of the things about the voter registration thing needs to be fixed. And maybe that's through universities being more proactive about making sure their students are registered either on campus or know about the ballot by mail process. I mean, ideally, I'd like to see that ballot by mail process simplified and extended to all Texans. And Representative Donna Howard has put a bill before the House before that. We'll see what the Republicans do, given their excellent record on voting rights. I think on the other hand, I think in terms of enthusiasm, I think it's what the party is doing. Jared, my counterpart, and I are where we are because folks in the party thought it was important to not only campaign to young people, but to give them a seat at the table. And I think that's been something that's really good about, I've seen all across the state with Democrats, about county chairs and SDC members trying to do everything they can to bring young people into the institution of the party. And I think that will then magnify any impact. I think as long as if young people feel like they're looking into politics rather than being a part of it, then the enthusiasm will go out. And I think that's what we saw with Beto. I mean, so many young people involved in that campaign through either the Beto Ambassador Program, which I thought was genius. At UT, for example, the Beto campaign assigned a college student for every dorm building on campus. And they gave young people a decision-making capabilities and leadership, and it made them feel invested. And I think as long as young people are invested in the party, we'll continue to see that sort of Beto enthusiasm continue to grow. And I'm optimistic.
Ali Zadi, thank you so much. It was very, very informative interview. Really appreciate you coming on today. We hope to have you back again someday. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
All right, have a good day. All right. That was great. A really good interview. Chris, good job. Found a good interview there.
No, he's a fascinating young guy and really such a breath of fresh air for the future of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, it really was. And it only took 6 months for you to contribute something to the show,
Exactly.
So we really appreciate it.
I'm glad you got off your ass and did something finally. Goddamn ne'er-do-well.
Man, I just want a little joke there. I didn't.
This is really, really strange as y'all sit in my office week after week.
Can we move on, please?
Drinking my liquor.
Was it? All right.
Using the energy.
It's
My
time.
air conditioning.
It's time for America's fastest growing game. Was it a tweet? All right, here we go. Somebody's got to keep score. You got a computer, so keep
All right,
score.
I got it.
I'm going to read off a tweet. You need to decide quickly if it was an actual tweet by President Trump or did I make it up. And these tweets can go back to the beginning of Twitterdom.
All right.
Okay? First, number one. Op-ed praises Trump administration's efforts at the border. At Fox News, the Washington Examiner states, finally, the government has taken steps to stop releasing unoccupied minors to criminals and traffickers. This was done by the Obama administration.
Wait a minute.
That's a tweet. That's a real tweet.
Before you read a tweet, remember that it's like 240 characters. So that was way more than 240.
So what's your answer?
It was a tweet.
That was a tweet.
All right, mark down.
All right.
Was it really?
1.
That was a tweet.
That's a 1. Okay.
Okay, so you both got number 1 right.
All right.
All right, number 2. Prez Obama made a great choice. Try that again. Prez Obama made a great choice in at Hillary Clinton for Secretary of State. Obama has no experience. He needs her help.
Yes, that was a tweet.
That was a tweet.
Wrong. I made that up.
Okay.
You both missed that one.
We're still tied.
Well, you said it could have gone back, and he's so two-faced.
I know. That's why.
It's a good ploy.
Yeah. All right. Number 3. I have never seen a thin person drinking Diet Coke.
Tweet.
Tweet.
That's correct. That was a real tweet. All right. Number 4. Every day, our police officers race into darkened alleys, deserted streets, and onto the doorsteps of the most hardened criminals. They see the worst of humanity, and they respond with the best of the American spirit. America's LEOs have earned the everlasting gratitude of our nation.
That's too eloquent to be Donald Trump. I would say not.
I think that was a tweet.
You're wrong. That was a tweet.
Okay.
Chris Bell takes the lead.
Right.
Finally!
The white man holding the brother down again.
Number 5. U.S. should never be held hostage at Saudi Arabia for oil. Price should be $25 a barrel. U.S. take control.
Tweet.
Not.
Damn.
The brother's taking over now.
All right, it's back to a tie. I have a 1 tie break.
This is it?
This is it for a tie break. Right now, this is the tie break.
All right, where's the dramatic music?
We'll have to add that in later.
All right.
Now the Chinese are hacking at New York Times. When will we hold these thieves accountable?
Not a tweet.
Tweet.
Damn!
End zone dance.
What does he win, Chris Bell?
Another drink of his rock gut liquor.
All right, that was America's fastest growing game. Was it a tweet? We'll have another round next week. No, we won't. I won't be here. We'll have another round in 2 weeks.
James and I may just play against each other next week.
That's right. All right, let's move into our last topic, an independent judiciary. Who needs it? Trump gets sued in California every week, and it's appealed to the Ninth Circuit, and they lose. That's the way life is. That's the way it is. Trump lashed out last week, and he said it's a disgrace when every case gets filed in what's called the Ninth Circuit. Trump said in a lengthy criticism of the court, that's not the law. Every case in the Ninth Circuit, we get beaten, and then we end up having to go to the Supreme Court. Like the travel ban, we won. Every case, no matter where it is, they file it practically for all intents and purposes. They file it in what's called the Ninth Circuit. This was an Obama judge. I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen like that anymore. Now this is very interesting. Chief Justice Roberts, in what's been called the first for a Chief Justice, responded, we don't have Obama judges or Trump judges, Bush judges, or Clinton judges. Roberts said in a statement responding to Trump's comments, what we have is an extraordinary group of dedicated judges doing their level best to do equal right to those appearing before them. That independent judiciary is something we should all be thankful for. Trump fired back saying we do have those judges, and the fight was on. This is extraordinary for the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court to fire back at a president that way.
That's so encouraging.
Yeah.
And I didn't really follow the Roberts hearings that much. I knew he was going to get to confirm, so I was busy, so I didn't really listen. So I don't know that much about him, but I've been so impressed by some of the positions he's taken.
Well, the Affordable Care Act.
Affordable Care Act, gay marriage. I mean, it's really pretty extraordinary. And so he may be becoming the new Anthony Kennedy. I mean, obviously that's a very optimistic outlook.
Right.
But he was obviously very upset, and he knows what's going on regarding forum shopping and what have you, but he's sick of it. And he's sick of the judiciary coming under attack by the President of the United States, which has never been done and shouldn't be done.
Right. I mean, presidents have had problems with courts before, and President Obama certainly had his day with getting sued, but I don't think I've ever seen a president in my lifetime do what President Trump does.
Yeah, so I think that it's encouraging, as Chris said, but I think the proof will be in how he votes on major cases put there by the Trump administration. But the reason why I'm encouraged, the entire Trump administration, it's been the Republican Party has been a battle of the invertebrates, and it's just good to show some backbone from one branch of government, and it took John Roberts to stand up for the court system.
Well, Roberts didn't do this on his own. I mean, he the other members of the court, he certainly talked to them before he did it.
Well,
he did.
Well, of course, but at least they are standing up and showing some backbone, unlike the GOP-controlled Congress. And you haven't seen that. You've seen certain members come out and fire back at Trump. But what you've had during the Trump administration is a systematic attack on institutions, the FBI, the Justice Department, the courts, and Congress, and you can't continue to do that without somebody firing back.
What the more glaring example is the media, and basically he has worked very hard to destroy America's faith in the media, and he's made headway.
Right.
There's no question of that.
Yeah, but the media fires back in a way that the American people know that we're fighting back. He can call it fake news.
Yeah, but if people lose faith in the court system, then and already people have a sort of, I would believe polling would show, a limited amount of trust in the court system. And so if he keeps acting like it's all rigged and what have you, when that goes awry, then we're going to lose almost everything that we have as set up as far as protections.
And somebody like Jim Acosta fires back, and you say, somebody who works in the media or worked in the media for years, and you sit here and say he's just putting himself in the middle of the story.
No, I said that.
But you were agreeing with it.
No, I didn't.
Oh, I thought you did.
But
and you worked in the media.
But my point is not only has he attacked these institutions, he's attacked the electoral process. And the media, saying something about the media to me is punching down, and maybe even Congress. But when you say something about the court system, and Chris talks about the loss of faith in the system, you can't do that, because judges.
It's a breaking down of the entire democracy.
Absolutely. And so, credit to Roberts for firing back on it.
And here's the hypocrisy of the whole thing. You never heard anyone on the GOP side complain when the Obama administration got sued 49 times by Republican members of the attorneys general from the states, got together and sued through the state of Texas 49 times in Texas so that they could be appealed to the Fifth Circuit, which is the most conservative appellate court in the United States, so that they could win in Texas and lose in the Fifth Circuit, and then have to appeal the United States to the Supreme Court on a loss.
And obviously it's an extraordinary level of hypocrisy, which I also find so interesting in this day and age. I mean, that was sort of my bench watermark, if you will, as a reporter. If it was just so hypocritical, that's what really drew my attention. I wanted to report on it. Apparently now people say, oh, well, they just changed their views. That's fine. But interestingly about that, I mean, what bothers me about it, forum shopping, which the courts have gone to great lengths and jurisdictions have gone to great lengths to cut down on, still exists.
Well, the attorneys general do it all the time.
And obviously. And so, and it's certainly not right when the Republicans do it. And it's not right when the Democrats do it. But it's always going to come down, I think, in this day and age, to what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
That's right. But here's a really important point that I think the president's making that I don't think anybody's talking about yet is quickly here before the year ends, they may try to break up the Ninth Circuit. And the administrations have talked about this for years because the Ninth Circuit is so overcrowded that the docket is so big. They've been talking about doing it for administrative purposes. President Trump is talking about doing it for political purposes. And while he's got control of Congress, he may try to get the Senate to do it.
Well, what did
in the next month?
Yeah,
that's going to be a tough sell.
Yeah, that process.
But
I
think
take
he may
a little bit longer than that, and I think that people will see it for what it is.
I think everybody will see.
Move.
Everybody will see it for what it is. I don't think he cares.
But the Senate, I mean, he has to go through the Senate.
You're right
as well.
about that. No
I don't
doubt.
think it's going to get. I don't think that would get through.
That's his next political move. You watch. He's going to try to do it for the years out. Anyway.
Well, I've learned to never doubt you, Chris Tritico.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you.
You're right.
You're
about
quite
Beto.
the fornicator. I mean, the prognosticator. I'm sorry.
I think
That
you
too.
have
That
mixed
too.
up with Donald
All right.
Trump.
Let's move into out of left
This
field.
man's been happily married for 45 years.
Because he's quite the prognosticator.
That's right. All right, let's move to out of left field. I'll go first. You know, this is the end of the beginning of the week after Thanksgiving, and I was I always try to think about what I'm thankful for on Thanksgiving, and I was watching the news and I saw them ask the President of the United States what he's thankful for, and I've seen that every Thanksgiving week my entire life since I've been watching politics, and I've seen presidents be thankful for peace and prosperity, and I've seen presidents be thankful for all kinds of things, and until this year I saw the President of the United States thankful for himself and thankful for the fact that he's the president and he was here to do the things that he's done, and he was thankful that because he's president, he said that because he's president the country is safe. Screw you. I just couldn't believe it. It was the most stunning narcissistic interview he's given yet, and I didn't think he could top any of the things he's already done. How dare you? God, it was offensive. While you sat on your 100th vacation of your 2-year presidency at Mar-a-Lago, sucking money out of the budget, eating your well-done steak slathered in ketchup, you dared to thank yourself? Go to hell. That's the end of my...
I mean, were you really surprised about that?
No, but it's just offensive. Anyway.
So my out of left field is about the House Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte, who officially threw what should be considered a Hail Mary pass when he issued subpoenas to former FBI Director James Comey and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch. For the uninitiated, when that means that the GOP has thrown a desperation subpoena in hopes of giving the White House another shiny object that Andrea talks about all the time, the shiny object. Well, this guy's retiring at the end of this session. He's not going to be in power anymore. And he wants to have a private hearing with Lynch and Comey. Allegedly, this is all going to be kept in-house, but we know that the Republicans are prolific leakers, and they're going to take this over to the White House to give the president something political to trot out. Clearly a stunt. This is clearly a stunt. And so Comey did the right thing. He's fighting it. He called for a public hearing. The Republicans haven't really responded to that yet. But the point of this is that the Republicans know that this is a stunt. But I'm not worried about it because they always take their eye off the ball, and the pass falls harmlessly into the field. So this lesson for the Democrats, when you take over power in January, keep your eye on the ball.
Well, I'm going to follow along Chris Tritico's line and talk about Thanksgiving a little bit. Alice and I always go to a ranch just outside of Austin. It's sort of a family reunion for her father's side of the family, and we lost her father earlier this year, and we lost her uncle earlier this year, both wonderful men, and so there was a bit of melancholy in the air, obviously. It was rather somber given the people we had lost, but it was also extraordinarily interesting. There are always these articles written about beware of Thanksgiving and the political arguments, and there are even articles written about how to handle those. There really weren't any political arguments, and why that's interesting is that the majority of that side of the family has always been so incredibly conservative, and I was always sort of an outlier, but for a few really important members of the family, other important members of the family. But there were no arguments this year, and I really want to make my out of left field about Cousin Tom. He's not my cousin, but he's married to Allison's cousin Margaret, and I don't even know what the correct title would be, but he's a phenomenal guy, and he was a Baptist preacher, and now he's just a non-denominational preacher when he wants to preach, and he writes columns, and I have a feeling at one point in his life he was probably pretty darn conservative. But I know he's been troubled by it in recent years, and he was very heartened by hearing about the an article about the evangelical left that I told him about a year or so ago. Had never really heard about that, which is a phenomenal movement. Maybe we can talk about it more on one of our podcasts. But he sat down and very quietly on the couch told me, I just want you to know, this year I just had to vote straight Democratic. And there were a couple of exceptions, but those were people who were unopposed. But and he was excited about telling me. And even the people who have been so kind of exuberantly Republican in the past don't seem very exuberant anymore. And so I see really bright days ahead for the Democratic Party. And that's my out of left field, and I hope everyone else also had a very happy Thanksgiving.
Well, that's all the time we have this week. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and please rate us on iTunes. More important than that, we need you to subscribe. It's all about subscriptions. Go to Libsyn or your favorite podcasting site and subscribe to What's Left America. Much thanks to Vertical Ascension Entertainment for tape recording us and putting us on YouTube, and Keegan DeLeo, our in-studio producer. Have a great week.